Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it has been a good debate on the throne speech. As we know, that this debate is known as the general debate, where all members can state their views on any particular topic. And it's an opportunity for members to speak about the throne speech, which is the government's legislative agenda. And I want to make sure that that is clear. Because as you know, Mr. Speaker, and we had a discussion in the run up to 2020, and you'd ask how long the speech was going to be. And I said, it's not going to be that long because we need to get back to dealing with the legislative agenda and remembering that what we are doing inside of a throne speech is the government laying out its legislative agenda. With that much being said, Mr. Speaker, the throne speech, 3,500 words. Oh, no. There's no counting, opposition leader. 3,500 words was full of legislative items that the government intends to complete during this during this parliamentary session. And Mr. Speaker, I know from experience what happens when you lay out too big of a legislative agenda. You try for a particular session, you try to carry things over. And we'll remember the kerfuffle. Absolutely, yes, Mr. Speaker. You're referring to how you showed me those old throne speeches, from the honorable opposition leaders, day back in the UBP when those throne speeches came out. That's right. You're always on the opposition bench. So I got you. But I'm saying, but back then, they were only, 6 and 7 pages. That's it. And the fact is that this is nothing different. The deputy leader said that in the United Kingdom Parliament, he was being generous, 30 minutes. That speech is only 10. It's 10 minutes. That's what it is. And it is the laying out of the legislative agenda. We are legislators first, and it deals with the matters that are going to come before the Parliament. And I refer back to the time, remember in 2018, where we laid out so much, and I say, you know what, we're not going to prorogue the Parliament. We're going to continue through the session, because there's a number of unfinished things that are done in the throne speech. What I don't want to do is to have another throne speech that the government puts forward the same things which they put forward the year before. We set out the items that we intend to complete during this particular legislative session. And when I hear some members opposite speaking about the throne speech, it is as though if they want us to put on an election platform every year. That is not what throne speeches are about. They're about the legislation that is intended on being brought before the Parliament in that particular session. And so I just want to make sure that that is made clear. Of course, the first part of the general debate is the response to the throne speech. And the honorable opposition leader did give a response earlier today. And I think that members on this side have sufficiently dealt with the content of that response. But I'm going to start where I'm sure will get everyone excited, Mr. Speaker, and that is on the topic of sovereignty. Because, and let's be frank, Mr. Speaker, because we're all politicians here, and we all know what the political game plan is, and we all know and understand why the questions were asked earlier today. Because the 2020 general election saw an erosion of the One Bermuda Alliance's base. And there is nothing that the One Bermuda Alliance wants more than to talk about the Progressive Labor Party, and a vote for the PLP is a vote to take Bermuda to sovereignty. Now, quite frankly, I support sovereignty. Sovereignty is in this party's constitution. And being in this office for 5 years, I am a stronger proponent of sovereignty than I ever could have been. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because I have seen the disregard paid to our issues by the government in London. It is not affront to Her Excellency. because she is merely a representative of the United Kingdom government. And as the Honorable Attorney General set out in her ministerial statement earlier today, Mr. Speaker, this is not the government of Bermuda's sole item. This is United Nations resolutions. The United Nations has recognized Bermuda as a non-self-governing territory. We are still a colony. They have a special committee on decolonization. Bermuda is listed as a colony. We are not a fully democratic island. That is the fact. The United Nations resolutions say that all administering powers, of which the United Kingdom is the largest one of those administering powers, with so many different colonies still under their grasp, and all of those United Nations members are required to advance matters regarding self-determination to come off of the list. And the AG laid out the options. Here's the one thing I'm going to say, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to say it so the opposition leader can hear. We will continue to discuss sovereignty. So when the mention of sovereignty is made, it doesn't set off a whole bunch of wild, circus. Because it's important, as the Attorney General said, and the throne speech said, that we have a mature conversation on this topic. The Honorable Minister of Economic Development, the Honorable Minister of Tourism were with me at the Association Bermuda the Association Bermuda International Companies, ABIC. And there was a quarterly meeting, and one of the questions was asked was on sovereignty. And I laid out the government's position, and I made sure I said, we can have a mature discussion about the benefits and the drawbacks of what a change to our constitutional status means. Because it does not make sense that when we are faced with so many international challenges, that the international companies come to the government to ask the government to go to the governor, to ask the governor to go to the United Kingdom, to ask the United Kingdom to advocate on our behalf when our interests may not be aligned. Those are the facts. And we have seen countless times, you don't have to take my word from it. You can take the word of members opposite from when they were in government dealing with the exact same issues, whether it's an honorable member for constituency number 12, the former premier, whether it's the former Minister of Finance, Mr. Bob Richards. They all had to experience the challenge when on an international front, you have a government advocating for you that is not aligned with your interests. That's the challenge, Mr. Speaker. And so if we're going to have mature debate in this country, because let's be clear, this is a bipartisan issue. This does not have to be an adversarial one. Let us not get this into the mode of politics. Let us not try to take it to the level where this is all about trying to reclaim political base and trying to go at it every single time, because I know full well what the deputy leader of the opposition was trying to do earlier. He was trying to go back to that age-old trick. But sovereignty is important, and the discussion is important, and any mature country and democracy must have that discussion. And if, at the end of the day, the people of this country do not want it, the people of this country want to remain a colony, then that will be where we will remain. But that should not prevent us from having a discussion, a mature discussion, away from the scare tactics, away from all the rest, on what this means. And that is precisely the direction of travel which the Honorable Attorney General, Minister of Legal Affairs and Constitutional Reform has laid out. Her statement today was very measured. When the report is tabled, all persons will be able to see it for themselves, understand it for themselves, and we will have a discussion in this country. And I sincerely hope that the members opposite will engage in that conversation discussion. I sincerely hope that we can have debates here talking about the history, talking about what this actually means, talking about how we have to educate persons and to work through that. And at the same point in time, Mr. Speaker, there are, as the Honorable Attorney General said, there's the long term, but there's also the short term. But any change to the Constitution has to be happening in a bipartisan fashion. So I welcome the engagement of the opposition leader. I welcome the engagement of the opposition on this because it is important that as a country we have these mature discussions and that they do not devolve into the old political tricks. Because if we're really talking about wanting to secure a future, if we're really talking about how can a place like Bermuda strike out further onto the international stage, strike international trade deals, make sure that we can do those things on a higher level, we always say we punch above our weight, then those are discussions that are worth having. So I sincerely hope that the same level of maturity of which I've asked for from all the members here on this issue will be the same level of maturity that will happen with the media. Because this is not about trying to do scare tactics. This is about a United Nations resolution that has directed all administering powers and all countries that are regarded as non-self-governing, which means not fully democratic, non-sovereign states, to go through a process of getting off that list. And that is a place where Bermuda should strive to get off. And whatever decision we make is a decision that we will have. Now, Mr. Speaker, now that that is done, what I want to certainly touch on are things that were laid out. Because I canvass, Mr. Speaker, the people in this party canvass, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to see the OB is out canvassing too. But that means that we talk to the person in this country. And I feel the angst. At a time when this country has been through a difficult economic period, at a time when this country has been through a once-in-a-century pandemic, and at a time when a country that has always had a very elevated cost of living is now seeing rapid global inflation, which is causing additional pain on families, especially working families in Bermuda. I get it. I understand the angst. I'm grateful for the debate today where persons recognize on that side, Mr. Speaker, about the good work that this government is doing. And I will take on board recommendations about how we can continue to progress. But I will go to something which I said during the election campaign that we had on our side, because we know we have free and open elections in the Progressive Labor Party, is that we will not solve our cost of living problem in this country unless we have fundamental tax reform. I hear the opposition leader say, oh, I'm going to repeat it again. We will not solve the cost of living problem in this country unless we have unless we have fundamental tax reform. Those are the facts. And so when persons speak about what is the delay, I will just say, you won't have to wait much longer. And what I will offer the members of the opposition, because as we go through these issues in the exact same way that when we were in opposition and we said if we want to do with immigration reform, if we want to deal with these issues, these things need to be approached in a fashion where people can have buy-in. I offer the Shadow Minister of Finance and opposition leader to make any submissions of which he wishes to be included in the pre-budget report, which will be tabled by this government before this House rises. So those items could go out for consultation. These are the same offers that we've made to the international business community, whether it be ABIC, ABIR, BILTER, the Trade Union Congress, the Employers Council, the Chamber of Commerce, the Hotel Association. All those offers went out because we're trying to make sure we have an opening budget process that is collaborative. And so, Honorable Opposition Leader, if you wish to clarify some of the things of which some of your members were talking about, clarify some of the things of which you are looking to see advance, we are more than happy to take those submissions as part of our open budgeting process because budgets are important. In the pre-budget report, just like we had a meeting of our parliamentary caucus where members could offer up ideas and suggestions that can form part of that document to go out to wide consultation as we go ahead and put together the next budget. I welcome that because that's what's necessary and required. And I sincerely hope that we will get something from the opposition to include there. Because one of the things that is critical to note is that, yes, we must work together to advance the issues here. But here's the thing, Mr. Speaker. We are the government. And being government means that you have to make difficult decisions every single day. Our country did have the fastest economic growth that it had had since 2007 last year. And yes, persons will say, well, we were recovering from the pandemic. I get that. But it's important to note that that economic growth was in the absence of our largest hotel operating in this country. That economic growth was driven, of course, by international business growth. And here's the thing. International business did not contract in 2020, Mr. Speaker. Which means that some persons, when I had the meeting with a ratings agency, like, oh, well, that's just a no. That's not the balance because international business did not contract in 2020. So when we are saying, and the honorable member for constitution number 12 was asking, where did that come from? These are the stats and figures that are released from the Department of Statistics. But here's the truth. That economic growth is not hitting everyone in this country. We know it, we get it, we understand it. And that economic growth is causing a crush in housing. We know it, we get it, we understand it. And that's why we respond with the action of the government, with a mortgage guarantee program, with a grant to the Bermuda Housing Corporation to ensure that they can go ahead and provide more affordable housing. When that's why this speaks to the throne speaks to reform of the Landlord Tenant Act to ensure that persons with vacant apartments who don't want to rent them because they don't want to be stuck with bad tenants, we can reform those laws to make sure there's a wider level of housing supply in this country, Mr. Speaker. Those are the actions of which you take. We heard the Honorable Minister of Economy and Labor speak about the work of which he is doing in his ministry. In his Global Entrepreneurship Week, there are multiple small businesses in this country that are continuing to be supported by this government. And we will continue to support them because they are the base of growth. And when we look back on our 5-year history, Mr. Speaker, it is this government that eliminated taxes for startup companies. It is this government that increased the resource of the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation. It is this government that reduced the tax burden on working persons in this country due to payroll tax, the lowest level ever, Mr. Speaker. That is what we have done. The elimination of duty on essential goods and the pass-throughs and the Cost of Living Act and the regulations. This is all about trying to do what we can to provide relief at the same points in time where we have difficult budget conditions. But things are looking up. In an uncertain world, Bermuda's regulatory environment stands out. As the Minister of Economy and Labor has said, companies are coming to Bermuda now. And the government cannot take its foot off the gas by providing the infrastructure which is necessary for this country to grow. And so whether or not that is all the roads that are being dug up, whether or not that is the construction of more residential units throughout the country, or whether that's the construction of residential units inside the city of Hamilton, and the successful execution of our economic recovery plan, Mr. Speaker. The throne speech is full of items that tackle the needs of the people of this country, Mr. Speaker. That is what is contained in this speech. Whether or not it is the reform to financial assistance to ensure that it works better, whether or not it is the creation of the Department of Labor, so when we have a minimum wage in this country, it can actually be enforced and the labor rules can be enforced in this country, Mr. Speaker. Whether or not it is the issues of which I spoke about when it's related to housing, Mr. Speaker, whether or not it is the Tourism Investment Act, which is vital. And I have to go to this because the Honorable Opposition Leader's speech spoke about St. Regis, and we built St. Regis without any change to the Tourism Investment Act. Nonsense, Mr. Speaker. Nonsense. You know why, Mr. Speaker? The government, the former government, gave St. Regis tax concessions in excess of what was in law to 10 years, but also in the master development agreement signed by that government said that those tax extensions will continue for a further 10 years if certain conditions are not met. So they gave a 20-year tax concession. Yes, that's how you get a hotel built. When our competitors are offering 25, we're around here arguing whether or not we should do 10 or 15. No, Mr. Speaker, we are going to make the decision to advance. Because just like other countries have realized, and we said multiple times, a hotel operating 24/7, employing persons, bringing tourists, raising airlift, we're not going to have airlift in this country until we have more hotel beds. There's no amount of whatever Minister of Tourism or whatever Minister of Transport can do. If there aren't hotel beds, there will not be airlift. And so while we sit here and talk about, no, we don't need to change, no, we don't need to change, it is completely disingenuous when the former government gave 20 years of tax concessions to St. Regis. Yes, that's why the hotel went up. That's why it went up. And it is a crying shame. And I'll call it, Mr. Speaker, because we're here and I'm the leader of the government. It is a crying shame that this government did not get Fairmont Southampton done last year when interest rates were lower and there was not as much volatility, Mr. Speaker. It is a crying shame. And yes, the government went through turmoil and a minister resigned because he couldn't get on board with the cabinet. But that's fine because decisions have to be made to advance. Because what is critical in this country is if we want to have jobs for the persons, we have to create the industries that provide those jobs. And tourism has been a major employer in this country, and tourism will continue to be a major employer in this country, Mr. Speaker. And the Tourism Investment Act changes, which will be brought by the Minister of Tourism, will ensure that we can have more tourism development in this country, Mr. Speaker. On the issue of education reform, the Minister of Education spoke about how Bermuda was invited to an international forum to talk about what it is that we are doing in this country, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Education has tried to involve members opposite, involve the community. Yes, decisions are hard, Mr. Speaker. No decision is easy. I told a story the last time we were here that Nia came home to me and said, Daddy, is it true that you're closing Northlands? None of these decisions are easy. We must work through. Because if we are honest with each other, if we are honest, oftentimes we buckle under political pressure and do things that are politically expedient rather than following through with a difficult decision that have to be made. And that's why this government has taken a different approach to the former government. Because if you want to bring people along, you must make sure that you consult widely. And though persons may not like the outcome of consultation that happened with education reform, there is no person that can criticize, honestly, the education and consultation process. Because it was designed to ensure that it was fair and ensure that it will stand up to legal challenge. And for the persons who are saying that the minister should make an arbitrary decision and just change one school because that might be politically expedient, that means, Mr. Speaker, it will set back the entire education reform effort and all the work and all the energy and all the students and all the teachers and all the retired teachers and the parents who've been a part of this effort. It would be for naught. We must keep in mind what is best for the students of this country, Mr. Speaker. We speak about the 100-year project, Mr. Speaker, The first 1,000 days from gestation all the way through, Mr. Speaker. It is about making sure that the first years, the formative years of our children's lives are best, because this is about the future. We speak about domestic violence, an issue in this country, Mr. Speaker. And the fact that the Minister of Social Development and Seniors is continuing to tackle that, taking models of what works well in other places to bring it here so that we can tackle domestic violence, which is not just violence against women. Domestic violence inside of our society. And I do not need to speak about the excellent record on the environment that this government has had, led by the Deputy Premier, Mr. Speaker. We are continuing to advance to make sure that Bermuda punches above its weight when it comes to issues of green energy, when it comes to the issues of leading on climate change, and there will be more bills in this session to deal with that. And that was what was in the throne speech, Mr. Speaker. And finally, when we talk about fairness, the Honorable Opposition Leader asks, what will our social insurance system look like? What will our payouts look like and all the rest? I will just tell the Honorable Opposition Leader to look at what happens in the United States, what happens in the United Kingdom, and what happens in Canada. All systems that used to have a fixed rate of social insurance payments, where everyone paid the same, whether you were the cashier making $40,000 a year or the owner of the store making $400,000 a year. The cashier paying 3% of their income, the owner of the store only paying 0.3% of their income towards social insurance. It is not fair. We will make the system fair. And the payouts will be the same, just like it is in the United States, just like it is in the United Kingdom, just like it is in Canada. It is that simple. We must fund and fix our social insurance system. And in a country as wealthy as ours, it does not make sense that the single parent struggling to make ends meet is paying the exact same amount as someone who is sitting on multiple properties, multiple businesses, and who can afford to pay more into the system. Other countries recognize this long ago, and we will ensure that in this legislative session, that system becomes fair, Mr. Speaker. So let me be clear, Mr. Speaker. This government has delivered for the people of this country over the last 5 years. One of the things that I always say, Mr. Speaker, is that if every decision that the government made, 99% of people agree with it, and 1% of the people deny with it, and you had 100 people, there'll be one person who'll be mad at you. If you made 100 decisions, someone would have been mad at you at least once on something, Mr. Speaker. On any given day, we will disagree on issues. That is the beauty of democracy. The question is, when you look at the overall body of work and progress, is progress being made? Working people in this country are paying less taxes, Mr. Speaker. There is education reform that is happening in our country, which has been long overdue, Mr. Speaker. The fact is that we are investing in our young people, Mr. Speaker, by making sure we put out policies, the National Youth Policy, which is making sure the one thing that Mackenzie Cole Tuckett spoke about, she's involved in that working group, Mr. Speaker, doing the work, because we are getting our young people involved to make sure that we take account of their views to build the future of this country so that they can come back and take care of us when we decide to move on, Mr. Speaker. That is what this government is doing, making progress on the various issues that we have. As the Honorable Minister of Economy and Labor said, we mailed out something, talked about 5 years of progress, and they called it propaganda. No, Mr. Speaker, it is what the people's elected government has delivered. The laws that were changed, the policies that were changed, and the benefits of which those persons saw. And we will continue to speak about those because that's what's important. And it is my hope that during this parliamentary session, as you have asked us, Mr. Speaker, we can try to be more civil, that we're back in person, and to talk about these issues and to approach these issues in a fashion. Because at the end of the day, there's only one Bermuda. We are the persons who the people in this country are counting on. And if we can't fix the problems, then no one can, Mr. Speaker. It is up to us. So I look forward to a parliamentary session that we can debate these issues, that we will get ideas from the opposition. I've extended an olive branch to allow them to submit matters of which can go out to consultation, because it is vital, Mr. Speaker, that during this dangerous time of economic uncertainty, Bermuda stands out. We have the opportunity to do that due to the groundwork which we've laid. We're leaders on climate change. We're leaders on regulation. We can be leaders in tourism again with more tourism investment, Mr. Speaker. We can do all of those things if we can do our job to get out of our way and make sure that this country can succeed. So as I close, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all the persons who contributed to this debate. I want to thank the persons on my side, Minister Hayward, Minister Ferbert, MP Richardson, who got a little bit of fire in his belly today, Minister Rebane, Minister Campbell, MP Adams, who I got to hear while I was inside speaking with you, Mr. Speaker, who basically said something that I know I'll use again in the future, that the government could have paid everyone in this country's power bill for a year and a half with the $210 million that we've had to spend on Morgan's Point, Mr. Speaker. And with that, I move that the following message be sent to Her Excellency the Governor. May it please Your Excellency that we, the members of the House of Assembly of Bermuda, thank Your Excellency for the gracious speech with which Your Excellency was pleased to open the present session of Parliament.
Thank you, Premier. Thank